board, and we'll get going. This is welcome to How to Win the Future. Basically a deep dive, sometimes even deeper, dive into Web3 and the next phase of the internet. Today, we're actually doing the second session on NFTs. For those of you who were a couple weeks ago, Alan will do a little bit of review in a little bit. And then today we're going to be going deeper and further into what's actually going on there today. We have a guest speaker, guest co-host with Alan today is Mr. Mike Mamola. He has been a great friend of mine, fellow coin carrier, all around good guy, car enthusiast. Yeah, it's an awesome guy. I'm really, really excited to hear what he has to say. And before Alan dives into the initial talk, I actually want to give Mike a chance to just give a little introduction on who you are, Mike, and leading into what you've been doing the last 13, 14, 15 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. So quick 30-second overview. Lawyer by trade, entrepreneur by nature, serial entrepreneur and angel investor. And so I stepped away from the practice of law in large part a few years back and really dove deep in tech. I got involved in crypto about 5 years ago. And then about 13 months ago or so, I heard the word or phrase NFTs for the first time. And so stopped to figure out what that meant. And immediately, as an attorney, recognized the utility of this new technology and how it would be revolutionary in changing every industry. So not just collectibles, but everything in every industry. And so I've been advising and consulting for various companies, NFT projects, crypto projects, et cetera, down here in Miami. Now, literally, my wife and I moved down here because there's so much going on. And so I'm excited to talk to you all about it.
Awesome. I almost was fast enough, but I'm going to share something a little bit later about Mike that Max, it relates to your story as well. So let's pass it over to Alan. And Alan, go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you, Mike, for helping. Aaron, can you let me share the screen? Thank you. There we go. Organize myself here. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, as Aaron said, the last session we went into NFTs. If I recall, it was digital rights gone wrong, and we took a whole fun hour and we just ripped apart NFTs. I've got like maybe almost 500 articles on NFTs, and it took a little while to find the positive ones. Actually, it's only about a quarter of them, and the negative press has gotten worse over the last since about January. But I think it's, I'll recap some of that as we go forward, just to refresh everyone's memories. But what's the point of this session now is to flip the coin, right? And to say, now, wait a minute, if some of these problems can be solved, there's immense opportunities in this space. We're literally reinventing what it means to be humans in a digital world. It's that big. And I put some thought into this. We deliberately named this session In Pursuit of Fair Exchange. This really is the opportunity of this Web3 space. And that's important. I think as we go through this, I'll keep bouncing off of this topic and sort of comparing what we're seeing and versus what used to be in Web 2. And then asking ourselves, is this better? Are we heading in a better direction? Is this is this in pursuit of fair exchange or not? We've talked a lot about Web 3, and one of the things I had not mentioned in previous sessions was that the term itself was coined by Gavin Wood, one of the co-founders of the Ethereum project, in 2014, right? So it's been around for a while, this whole concept, and it's South by Southwest ended like 2 weeks ago, and my news feed is just filled with Web3. It's just inundated with it. When we talk about this space, I know we just had a conversation before everyone came in about the law diffusion of innovation, which is this blue line here. I need to just, I like to tell everyone when we start these sessions that I'm not a finance expert, I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a cryptographer. I'm more like all of y'all on this call. I'm what's called a product manager. And I take early innovations and attempt to build the first workable solutions to real world problems. And this involves explaining these technologies, right? And the potential of them to a larger and larger audience. Taking things that were previously too complex for people to generally understand and distilling them down into simpler concepts that a wider audience can grasp in order to drive market adoption, right? And more importantly, our job is to get people excited, right, about new technologies and what they can do with it. And that's what I'm hoping to do here with you guys, is to go through these, go through this in a way that you can grasp how you might use this in your life or in your industry. This is a diagram. We keep going back to this, and I kind of warn everyone. This is how, if you're going to think like a product manager, you want to kind of understand these different concepts. We have the diffusion, the law of diffusion of innovation, which is this blue line, where we market adoption goes initially from innovators to early adopters, early majority, and then a late majority and laggards. These are the people that only adopt the technology when they have no choice, right? We have this yellow line, which is this sort of market share adoption, and technology generally moves from a genesis phase into a custom build phase. And then if it actually solves problems, then there'll be utility in it going through a product phase. And then if it really reaches high levels of adoption, it ends up normally being a component in higher order and complex systems. And so we've covered this topic, this idea that the technology sort of layer, or they build on one another like Lego blocks. And so that's an important idea as a product manager. And then the third one is this hype cycle. Gartner is the one that publishes these things, and what they'll do is for any particular technology segment, they'll have like 100 dots on this line. And the theory is that technology or ideas sort of go through this hype and then trough cycle. And some of you may be aware of a thing called a chasm, which is around here, around like 15%, where all this stuff sort of crashes and either burns or it's actually useful and it escapes through this plateau productivity sort of idea. So just to reiterate from previous sessions, it's those of us that aren't as technical as the people that work on this stuff. We need sort of mental models to begin to understand these things and to draw parallels. So it's useful to think of blockchains in this Web3 space, these protocols, as being built up, composed of mathematical devices. These are different from normal software that we've seen throughout history. These mathematical devices and cryptographic devices, they're pure. They're sort of black or white. They're hardened. And for the first time, what we're seeing in Web3 is the cryptographic community creating these mathematical devices, and then software developers actually using them to build more and more complex systems. It's an effective mental model. These mathematical devices, we'll talk more about them in future sessions, but some examples of them would be, for instance, the cryptographers can make mathematical devices that can secure communication between two parties, or they can create mathematical devices that can detect if the message has been altered. We can create mathematical devices that prove that people know things without revealing the underlying information. On and on and on. We have devices that allow people to spread cryptographic keys across many parties. And what's happening now is software developers are assembling these things in new and interesting ways. So this is an important sort of, as a product manager, we'll get to this at the very end when I'll go through a list of all the different ways in which people can invest and win the future, if you will. It's not just buying and selling tokens. There's a lot of things that we can build as creators. But this is an important kind of mental model, that something unique is happening in this Web3 space, that it's a different computing paradigm made up of these hardened mathematical building blocks. And we now have this cycling between them and the software community in this sort of rapid pace of iteration. Previously, we had talked about another parallel mental model that's useful is to imagine these blockchains as just being a big spreadsheet in the sky with like two columns, right? This is a more detailed picture of it. We have on the left, we have a public key, and on the right, we have the private key. And the private key gives someone a right to make another record in the ledger, so to speak. and update the public key, which is the address. What's interesting about this, because these are just mathematical devices, right, that are doing their thing. What's another area of innovation is where we create what are called token standards. And we'll go through that again in a minute, but we need to give these numbers context. So it's sort of like, imagine having contracts that may be regular or fairly frequent in your business. And they have things, you put in names, you put in numbers, you put in dates, right? If you just took those names, numbers, and dates, and you looked at them on their own without the contract, you wouldn't know what they mean, right? But when you drop those variables into a contract, right, suddenly everyone knows what all those variables mean. And so that's what's happening here. We're taking these mathematical devices, and then we're creating standards for which we're imbuing these numbers meaning, we're giving them meaning. So in the Ethereum blockchain, this is just a sampling of some of the token standards that are important. ERC20 is a standard for fungible tokens, which, so just to recap, means that you can take 4 quarters and you can compose that into $1. And you can break $1 into 4 quarters. That's what fungibility means. It's decomposable and recomposable. ERC 721, however, is like the opposite. It's saying that all these tokens they represent unique things, one-of-a-kind things. This is really useful for things in the real world, like, devices and products and things that have CPUs in them, things that have, serial numbers. We can now begin to represent physical things in this digital space. And then just to show how complex this stuff can be, excuse me, in the gaming space, we have this ERC 1155, because in games, we have both fungible things, we have like gold in games, but we also have items in games, right? So ERC 1155 is a token standard or a smart contract template that defines, it says if there's one of a thing, it's non-fungible. If there's many of a thing, it's fungible. This allows the game builder to deal with all the assets in the game with a common standard. And then just to go on further, there's EIP 2981, which is a way of handling royalties, so that the original creator can get a royalty from subsequent, maybe secondary sales, right? We also talked a bit in the last session when we talked about the things that are wrong with NFTs. We mentioned that the reality in this use case, where there can be an infinite number of blockchains, theoretically, and this protocol only works on Ethereum. So if you mint say a piece of artwork on Ethereum and then you sell it and someone resells it, they take that asset and go mint it on another blockchain, you've lost the royalty chain. This is one of these gaps in the way that things actually work that we need to think of as an opportunity. So so this is kind of a background, just to reiterate kind of from previous sessions, so people can follow along. To recap, what we're seeing generally wrong in this Web3 space, and to give it some justice, in the last session, I talked quite a bit about how all these problems have existed in the past. Web 1 had to solve these problems, and it did it in certain ways and had certain repercussions. Web 2 went about solving these problems in certain ways, and it had repercussions. And Web 3 is just really another attempt at solving all these same problems. The identity problem of ownership and possession, the architecture problem of centralized versus decentralized, this human behavior gamification problem. Are we dealing with assets or an experience or both? This security problem, asset protection and control, and the digital rights problem, fraud and copyright infringement. And of course, because these are mathematical devices, they're kind of unforgiving. They have, they're great because they're very reliable and trustable, but they're also unforgiving. So we're making trade-offs in terms of the human experience. So let's kind of look at just 2 of these that I think are important to go a layer deeper. So when we talk about the architecture problems and identity problems, one of the important So we've been talking about blockchains as being two columns in the sky, kind of like a big ledger in the sky. The Bitcoin white paper actually doesn't talk about Bitcoin as being a ledger. It refers to itself as being a state engine. And if we look at Web 1, what's interesting about it is that in order to make those servers scale back in the 1990s, I remember having hundreds of servers that were like 40 pounds with 24 megs of RAM in each one of them. And in order to make these things scale to tens or hundreds of thousands of users simultaneously, we had to take state out of it. This idea that requests went back and forth and we had to keep things in memory. So it's important to remember that the web is fundamentally stateless. It's that way so it works, so it performs cost effectively. We also had standards bodies that created standards. Individuals were generally anonymous, and community was basically, it was a global community. But we couldn't make money this way. So Web 2, we introduced cookies and we got a surveillance system. We ended up with platforms controlling their own sort of proprietary protocols. We ended up with platforms owning our identities, and then platforms defining our communities. And so what's fascinating is Web 3 is about sort of ripping all this out and saying, look, we're going to take control of our identities in a self-sovereign state. We're going to self-organize into communities. We're going to create community-based protocols. But in order to do that, we need a state engine so that everyone in the community can now transact, and we have a record of all the transactions. We can trust each other, so to speak. So as we go forward and we look at, let's see. Yeah, so here's some repeating themes that we want to pay attention to when we get into all the NFT use cases, right? We want to look for communities forming. I think you're going to see that kind of repeating theme of communities, sometimes around established brands and established companies. You're going to see communities deciding on how these shared platforms should work for the community, for themselves, and even funding them. And the use of the NFTs in particular, we want to watch for this as we look at the use cases, providing transparency and sort of the gamification of the human behaviors in the community to create desired outcomes. And let's see. So y'all ready to talk about the NFTs now? Got all that background behind us? All right. So this is two bits of information I thought were really telling. So why do people buy these NFTs, right? This was a little survey I found on LinkedIn, and only 19% said they buy it for the art itself. And only 4% when they're buying, in the case of Bored Ape Yacht Club and many of the other initial NFT projects, they were originally profile pic projects. Only 4% are buying these for profile pics. But 35% are doing it because of the community. And more importantly, access to a community. Very interesting. And then, probably not surprisingly, 42%, they want their value to go up. So what they're really doing is they're investing in the community much more than they're investing in this as art. And they're investing in the community with their energy and their time. Something to think about. Meaning they're buying the NFTs, but they're also contributing to the success of the community. They're engaged. So I think many of us have heard this phrase, the medium is the message. And you'll see similar things said to this. NFTs are not art, they're not collectibles, they're not a scam or Ponzi scheme, they're a tool. They're a medium, they're an expression, they're an extension of existing practices of creation and self-expression. You'll also see, like this fourth statement, things that are they're not exactly accurate the way that it's stated. So in this case, they say these are simply code attached to data and assets expanding on what's possible. Actually, as we talked in the last session, that's not precisely what's happening. This is more a statement of what it could do. And I want to point out that this is exactly what we're doing with the Data Freedom Foundation, what our patents do. We literally attach the smart contract code to the data and the assets, and we have it and we're proposing it as a global standard. But you'll see this, you'll see statements made that are where they're mixing aspirational statements with factual statements. And it kind of makes things a little confusing as to exactly what you can and can't do. Here's another example of the right-click kind of paradox. This idea that the image is sitting on a file server somewhere, and the NFT really is, it's not much more than just a receipt. It's proof that you purchased something. It's not really proof that you own it. So in this case, this is actually from a blockchain educational site, and they say what you can right-click and save. They admit you can save the image in the file itself, but what they're saying you can't right-click and save. There's community again. We have utility, which is vague, but I'll get to that. When we get into the NFT use cases, there actually is an immense amount of utility that we can tap into. There's a record of proving that you own something. This is, again, kind of a little bit of an overstatement. It's proof that you purchased it, the amount you paid and when. It assumes you purchased it from someone that actually owned it. So this is where there's a bit of a gap and a bit of an opportunity to fix some things in the system. When we think about these NFTs as assets, there's this idea of fungible, like physical assets like dollar, gold, and coin, or digital assets like the way we move dollars around with bits and bytes, as well as our traditional cryptocurrencies. Yeah, I said that. And then there's non-fungible, which can be digital assets like media and certificates and collectibles, or non-fungible physical, which would be like, it could be real estate. It could be real physical assets. So as we go through these examples, I'm going to give you a few that are purely digital, a few that are purely physical, and then a few that are a combination. And with each one of these, Mike and I are going to tag team the different use cases. And Mike, before I get going, I know I was going to give you a chance to chime in about the overall themes. So before we jump in, is there anything that you think you want to add?
No, I think it's everything is great so far. Let's keep going.
All right. Thank you, Mike. So our first example. So in the last session, we really tore apart art and collectibles for good reason, because you can't really control the asset. I'm just going to read a quote to you guys. This is the kind of thing that you'll hear people saying about this space in the art. They'll say, the need for digitally proven the authenticity and scarcity of visual arts is of paramount importance, something NFTs have managed to address with the help of cryptography and blockchains. In a nutshell, crypto arts derive their value from digital authenticity and ownership. While anyone can download and save the image, the same cannot be said when proving ownership of a particular image. This is the space where there's the most opportunity in terms of things that are actually broken. Because, and I think if you want to dig into all of that, we can go watch the previous session. But if we could solve for those problems, if we can prove ownership, if we could control how others use the asset, if that could be a standard, right, then this becomes a really powerful use case. We see examples of people proposing token standards where these NFTs can be composable and nestable, where they're adding to the complexity of how you can program with these media assets. The opportunities here, if we can fix these problems, are huge. And let's see, the next use case, Mike, you're ready for this one? Music, media, and sports.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tremendous opportunity in each of these spaces. Obviously, you know, for music, for me, I remember when I went to law school, I wanted to become an attorney to represent artists because I thought that they weren't being taken care of properly by labels in many situations. And there wasn't a technology that allowed musicians or creatives to interact peer-to-peer with their audiences. So that was very difficult. And that was, you know, when I heard of NFTs, I said, wow, this is the opportunity. So, you know, the opportunity for a creative like a musician or someone in media or an athlete to be able to create some piece of content, whether it's a song or something that an athlete wants to put out for their fans, and then to be able to monetize it directly is extraordinary. And so we've talked about it, you know, the technology allows not just for that primary sale where someone would benefit, the creator would benefit from it, but then like you just talked about briefly before, with the technology allowing for secondary sales. So we don't have to track things. We don't have to go back and look at all the cross collateralization and things that would happen historically in entertainers trying to get paid for what they're creating. It's right there now in the blockchain. It's built into the smart contracts. And so it's an amazing opportunity for creatives to monetize their brands and their talent and share it with their audiences directly. So very, very exciting.
Yeah, Mike, so who here remembers when they first heard the word disintermediation? Yeah.
I just heard it for the first time right now.
All right, then let's go back then, because this idea goes back to Web 1. That was the promise of Web 1, was that we'd be able to remove the intermediaries, these extortionary intermediaries. And so the first time I heard the phrase disintermediation was way back in like 1994. The problem is that that's not what happened. We actually built more intermediaries. We built more monopolies and abusive intermediaries. And so what Mike's talking about is this concept, that this promise of disintermediating the creators and consumers of goods and services, getting rid of the middlemen that take more and more and more out of the economic pie. And again, if we can seize our identities and organize into communities and build our own protocols, whether on state engines, we can finally disintermediate these extortionary middlemen, like what Mike was talking about in the music and entertainment industry. That's also a theme to kind of look for as we look through these use cases. Now,
sorry, Alan, just to build on that for a second, then same with regard to athletes, right? And the need for agents and managers, the way we have historically for you know, athletes to monetize themselves with various brands. Now they have an opportunity to do this utilizing this technology.
Finally, actually, the promise of the web finally coming to fruition. Yeah. Excuse me. So the other use case is gaming, and we have this kind of high up here for a reason. This is just an example of some how the gamers think about and model game economics. Gaming NFTs are kind of a match made in heaven. For a good mental model here, imagine a pro sports version of what we currently call electronic sports. If you don't already know, if you don't play video games, many games have global championship competitions, and they have titles. They have celebrity teams that win these competitions. They live stream these competitions to 725 million people annually. These winning teams have sponsors, and it's their career. So what we have already in place is this kind of foundation for there being professional digital game performers or athletes, as the case may be. And we already have billions, literally billions of people who buy digital goods inside games. And the reason why we haven't seen the adoption of NFTs in the gaming space quite yet is because the games go through a development cycle. It takes about 1 to 2 years to implement these technologies in games. So I'm predicting, and others are predicting, that we're going to see this sort of NFT marketplace for game assets evolving and sort of launching in the next year or two. The economics in these games are complex enough that Harvard actually taught a course on the economy of World of Warcraft. I know personally from playing the game over the last decade that there has been a black market where you could trade your in-game gold for real money. People actually in other countries around the world were actually playing the game, making gold and selling it to schmucks like me, all right, to buy things. So there's like this give and take, but it was a black market. That's changed now. World of Warcraft over the course of the last like 10 years has really ramped up the sophistication with which they monetize in-game assets. That black market has now been brought in-house. You can now buy gold directly from them. In fact, if you look at the numbers for Blizzard, their number of players goes down, their profits are still going up. There's a reason why Microsoft bought Blizzard Activision for like tens of billions of dollars. So when these games look at NFTs, it allows for the creation of a marketplace across the games for all the participating games. This NFT marketplace allows these gamers to compete, with the winners ultimately becoming kind of professionals in their field. When we add NFTs, we get this kind of marketplace-driven play-to-earn model. Play-to-earn model. People are playing and they're actually making a living playing the game. And you're probably like, wait a minute, how does that work? Because usually you pay money to play a game, right? Well, when they play these games, they're competing, usually in groups, in teams, to earn, but really to win, in this case, NFT items that can be sold on these marketplaces. These items, you can imagine them as like new gear with better statistics on it. It's like leveling up your in-game performance. It lets you, increases the chance that you will win playing against other players. So they're highly desirable. They could be cosmetic. People may desire them because they're rare, because they have cool special effects like little glows and glitters and butterflies or whatever it is that you like. And some of these in-game assets are so powerful or rare or desirable or both that the marketplace price is correspondingly very high. And in some cases, we're seeing some of these items selling for tens of thousands of dollars. And that is how the people are playing games, making money. But understand, as we think about these things and we kind of bounce them off of this concept of fair exchange, there's a lot of players that if they don't pay money to get the gear, or if they don't play well enough, then they don't make money playing the game. So it's interesting. It's a really interesting model.
And Alan, can I add on to that for a second?
Oh, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's another economic opportunity here. So you have people, like me, that buy NFTs that are used in gaming, but don't necessarily have time or the knowledge to play the games at a sophisticated or high level such that you'd earn. And you can lease or rent or let others buy your NFTs or use your NFTs to play and structure various relationships with them, so that when they're in the PD, the play to earn spaces, everybody, they're winning, they're earning, and you also through the use of this asset, the same way you would rent out an apartment or something to someone, would be able to generate some revenue from it.
Yeah, and it seems weird. It seems like, well, there's celebrities in this space. There are people that have sponsors. There are teams that have sponsors. There are people that are very high level players, professional esports players in teams. And what I think we're going to see emerge out of this space is the equivalent of professional sports, like professional baseball and basketball and football. We're going to have a professional esports environment where they're.
I was just going to say, and now, we're seeing the brands come in, right? So somebody that plays the World Series of Poker, if they're wearing a World Series of Poker shirt and they make it to the final table, then they get that bonus. We're seeing the same thing now in this space where people are using these skins. If you have this certain skin and you do certain things or earn certain things, you can be rewarded for it accordingly, depending on which brand you're endorsing or playing with it for.
Yeah, right, Mike. Yeah, I've got like a decade of marketing background, and that's all we did. This is all we did. I even did a Mountain Dew promotion with World of Warcraft, where we integrated marketing whole thing into them. But yeah, there's all these things are mixing, right? So one of the problems of going through these use cases is drawing lines between them. There's a lot of bleeding in between a lot of these examples. You can begin to mix and match them, right? You can mix gaming with fashion and with sports, with celebrities, with music and entertainment, with big brands that are trying to build loyal audiences. There's all kinds of combinations of these different use cases. Absolutely. There's another example in this space is credentials and certificates. So many job applicants and university admissions require applicants to provide specific documents and certificates to verify their competence and expertise. NFTs are a good way to represent academic credentials and any kind of other certificates that we may get. NFTs can provide proof of attendance, degrees earned. They create an immutable record of courses taken and issuing tokens for each course completed, along with verifying any degrees earned. In the future, really, the issuance of a paper certificate probably won't be a thing. It'll probably be more important that the certificate is recording your credentials and your achievements on the blockchain that others can verify. This can even go so far, this is where we start getting into maybe smart government and government adoption of NFTs, but technically a birth certificate can be an NFT. And in fact, that would be a fantastic thing to issue to newborns by, say, a healthcare provider or government entity, because issuing one of these to every child would be an effective way to quickly create a lifelong digital identity, that whole self-sovereign identity, right? This could be the basis of it. So this is another concept that I think is useful. And I'm just going to touch on this idea of intellectual property. This is another use case, right? Where we have customers of intellectual property are paying for a patent, and all the inventors are getting their respective licensing fees automatically. So this is just some examples of what was the digital space, and now we're going to jump over to the physical space, and we're going to talk about non-fungible token examples in like real estate and in actual physical goods. And Mike, you're the real estate expert, so we're going to hand this back over to you.
So thank you. I think we're all aspiring experts in this space, right? We're all learning, and it's so exciting. But I was at a real estate event, crypto real estate event last night here in Miami, where we were talking about some things, and it's just it's overwhelming what's happening in the space. One of the groups, they did the first real estate crypto transaction last year, and as of right now, they have almost 1,000 closings in the pipeline, crypto based. And what people don't realize is, for example, with a real estate transaction, there are about 80 people that are involved that touch a file to get a house or a piece of property sold. We have the buyer and the seller and the attorneys and the title company up front that people think of. There are a lot of people in the background. When you talk about NFTs and you talk about using this technology, there are about 4 people that are involved, and it removes a lot of that potential for human error and really expedites it in terms of the way it can be done. So did you have specifically, Alan, what we wanted to talk about? Because I know we're limited on time here, so I don't want to run over.
Go for it. No.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we do traditionally in real estate now will be done with NFTs and on the blockchain. Think about being able to, like you said, immutably establish who owns a property, everything that was attached to that property, up and through the inspection of a property, the closing, the transactions, the mortgage that was attached to it, the licensing, everything on the blockchain in an immutable fashion is just unbelievable, because the way that things happen now in real estate is very antiquated. It takes a long time. We've done a lot of closings at my law firm, and I can tell you that it's not easy to get. Anybody who's bought a piece of property knows that. So this will change everything. We have the ability to take tokens and create the ability for the transaction to occur. There's something called fractionalization now, where we can tokenize an actual building or a property, and that can be divided down into slivers, and so that people can buy a piece of the Empire State Building, for example, whereas they wouldn't otherwise be able to do something like that. So it provides a whole host of opportunities here that I don't think we ever could have imagined. One of the other interesting plays here is creating these the NFT whatever organizations, or the DAOs. I don't know how far into DAOs we're going to get, that are putting these together, where people can be part of it, and they can, purchase pieces of large investment groups, properties all over the country and all over the world that are part of these DAOs that we're putting together. And that just opens up that opportunity to people that wouldn't otherwise have it, because, they, depending on the amount of their appetite for investment, they can come in as light or as heavy as they want to. And so, with regard to, you have here ownership rights, voting rights, management rights, access rights, all of that established outright open source, in the code, so that we all know who's doing what, why it's being done, how it's being done. Really, really exciting.
Mike, how comparatively speaking, what does it take to sell a building today? And then in terms of time versus how much time you think it would take to sell a building if you fractionalized it?
3 months versus 3 days, depending on the building. Anybody that's closed on a house, you're looking at 60 days traditionally, right? We can get it done in 60 days. By the time we do this, that, and the other thing, it gets set and closed in 60 days or whatever. You can do it in a week now here with this technology. It's unbelievable.
So it helps with liquidity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the biggest things, the opportunity to allow that for people or provide that to people it's incredible. That hasn't been the case. It's been slow and people wait and it takes a long time. And it's typically we're talking about a lot of money that people are waiting a long time for. So this is going to change everything. When I started really exploring NFTs, real estate, and I think most people recognize it now, real estate was really what jumped to the forefront of my mind. Like, wow, this is it. This is going to change everything.
Do you think this applies to any kind of capital intensive industry?
Yes. Yeah. It has to. I mean, it will. It's going to take. It doesn't matter whether it's a banking, finance, or real estate, transactions with some of the assets we discussed, whatever it might be, automobiles, boats, anything, airplanes, like you name it. This is going to apply.
Right. Yeah. So this is just. I think everyone's kind of grabbed onto real estate because of this. The inefficiencies in the process, but the idea of the fractionalization and the liquidity, I think, is interesting because it applies to all capital intensive industries.
Right.
This is really transformative. Yeah.
That's what I was, if people wanted to own, 1/100,000th of the Mona Lisa, if they decided to tokenize the Mona Lisa, then they could. And you have historically these opportunities that people didn't have access to. It was, kind of like allocated to the elite that had access to those opportunities. Now, everyone's from the comfort of wherever they may be can have access to these opportunities for these high producing assets like buildings or pieces of art, et cetera, that are being tokenized.
Max, do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you think that, because I see that all of these boxes here are for rights, but do you think this could ever be used for voting itself, and that there would be no claim of fraudulent voting and all that stuff?
That's a good question. So remember when I said we went back here and we said we've had these problems from Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3?
Mm-hmm.
You're describing this problem. And I would say that in this space, it persists as a problem. I mean, yes and no. The interesting thing about these algorithmic intermediaries, because they're built of mathematical building blocks, like in the case of voting, no one distrusts the voting mechanisms that these communities are using. That's what a DAO is. We'll actually talk about DAOs in the next session because it's really its own topic. But the DAOs, people are voting on the code that the platform is going to adopt. Okay. So I actually have in here one of these examples, and I'm not here digging for it, but I've got these collapsed slides. That's because I'm not even talking about all the topics that we could talk about. Voting is one of these collapsed topics, actually. This technology could actually improve the voting situation that all democracies already face, technically speaking. But there is still this identity problem. That's still not. That's the hard part. There's a lot of work happening in this space by a lot of people globally. So you get okay. So when we think about let me go back here real quick because I think I skipped something. Okay. So when we're talking about non-fungible tokens for physical items, one of the important concepts that we want to also keep in mind is this idea of a digital twin. It's a virtual representation that serves as the real-time digital counterpart of a physical object or process. This concept originated back in 2002. It was the first time that this idea of a digital twin came up, and it was used by NASA to simulate improved models of how to send things into space. It's important to mention that when we're talking about NFTs in this physical world, everything physical can be represented digitally as a digital twin, and an NFT is a perfect way to do that as a standard. Just about everything that can run software, physically that can run software, can be represented as a digital twin. We often talk about digital twins as in the same way we talk about the idea of an Internet of Things, right? So all these devices and all these things that we make smart in this world, we put software and hardware in it and network it. They can now interact programmatically with other things and people around it. That's the Internet of Things. And you really can't understand the supply chain stuff without sort of touching on these topics. What this digital twin concept gives us is the ability to analyze what happened, detect anomalies to what happened, model different corrections and analyze them, and even predict future outcomes. So think things like smart cities, smart homes, smart farms, smart transportation, smart manufacturing, smart energy, smart healthcare, and go on and on. Smart wearables, smart retail, smart supply chains. That's what we're talking about here, this idea of these digital twins and being able to model them. And the NFTs is like the perfect standard with which industries can do this and can collaborate. That said, let's dig a little deeper into the actual supply chain use cases. So just like the tracking of and the ownership of all the other assets, physical and digital assets we've been talking about, in this smart supply chain space with NFTs, we track the products from manufacturing all the way through to shipping and delivery. Amazon's doing this with NFTs, where they're tracking the product's journey through the supply chain, from point of origin to customer. NFTs can be attached to a product, giving it an NFT identifier that cannot be tampered. NFTs can help track products with metadata about their origin, journey, as well as storage locations and even temperatures. This allows specific batches of products to be recalled more effectively when needed. It gives customers transparency because they can see the entire supply chain data as well, and they can make better purchasing decisions. This transparency and immutability ensures kind of the reliability of the supply chain. Right now today, if a car manufacturer finds out that a certain batch of a car part was faulty, they have really no way of knowing which cars they went into. And as a result, they'll have to recall an entire year's worth of cars to replace that part. But with NFTs and with the tracking of this level of granularity in supply chain, that scenario now, the manufacturer could say, okay, we know a batch of parts were bad. We know exactly what cars they're in. And we're going to recall those cars alone. And this could save manufacturers tens, hundreds of millions of dollars collectively. NFTs also ensure that a product that you're purchasing is authentic. They can store information about the manufacturing process. And this touches back on this idea of fair exchange, right? If you as a consumer or as a buyer of a product, if you're loyal to a brand because it makes claims about how it behaves in the world, those claims are now verifiable. Things like food, right? Being able to trace food, like fake food products, for instance, supplements or medicine. Again, NFTs let us trace that product. Imagine just scanning a QR code and seeing the entire journey of a product from its manufacturing all the way to the store. And again, this idea of digital twins in this level of granularity and tracking of these things and optimization of these assets, it's not just supply chains, it's all physical assets. This is really the breadth of the opportunity. So we're going to end on two more use cases. Since we've talked about digital twins, this sort of pairing of physical and digital items that represent the same thing. Now we're going to dig into two use cases that talk about how these are being done today. That happen they're not actually industrial. Okay, so the first one is this idea of fashion and wearables. Luxury brands like Louis Vuitton and Gucci and Dolce & Gabbana, they've already gotten into this game of NFTs. They want to leverage them primarily for brand promotion engagement, but again, we're seeing this idea of brands building communities, right, and engaging those communities. And ultimately, what they're trying to do is they're trying to preserve loyalty in those communities. Luxury brands face huge losses in revenue and brand reputation from counterfeits, and secondary markets are nearly impossible for these items for that reason. NFTs in fashion provide authenticity to reduce counterfeiting and provide the trust to drive these secondary markets. With NFTs, customers can be sure that they have verifiable and genuine products. And this can be accomplished, again, with this idea of the digital twins and providing authenticity and trustable provenance through the supply chain from its origin. So you know, if you're buying a product from a luxury product, you can actually determine whether it's a counterfeit or not in concept. There's also this blending, right, of this digital space. Over here on the right, we see this augmented reality where people are buying NFTs that represent clothing, and then they're taking a selfie and the clothing is being put on top. So we're already seeing fashion houses unveiling lines of digital apparel that you wear as augmented reality, like in these pictures.
And then,
yeah,
Alan, can I just add to that in a separate but related way? In some instances, the NFTs themselves are becoming the brands. You mentioned Bored Ape Yacht Club. That's for people unfamiliar. That was one of the earliest ones that, people bought this NFT for about, a couple $100 in many instances, and now they're worth $300,000 at a minimum. And so down here in Miami, you see people running around with hoodies and sweatshirts with a Bored Ape Yacht Club shirt or whatever, and it's a flex. You're letting people know, and brands like Adidas recognize the value in that community, and so they paired with them. So it's happening in both directions.
Yep. Again, that theme of community, right? And that theme of them creating their own marketplaces, their own intermediaries that are by their own design. And then brands brands are now tapping into those communities, vice versa. So it's interesting.
Real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Solution idea real quick is, can they make this into something that every household has? And this AI app can check out what you're wearing to make sure it's appropriate to go outside in. I mean, we make jokes about this all the time, right?
Yeah.
But I'm actually being serious here. Could that be a possibility? I mean, this could.
Yeah.
You guys may be thinking about this.
Yeah.
I just came up with an idea, and we could all go in on this and configure it.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, that could be made. I mean, I would be curious to see how the programmers program aesthetic judgment into the app. I think that would be the challenge, right? But yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah.
We could get fashion designers or experts, like Mo or somebody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
I hear you, Max. Thank you, man. Obviously, you look at these pictures, what you would wear and what other people would wear can be very different things. So it's fascinating how these communities evolve their own aesthetic. Let's just say that. So, and Mike, if you're prepared, I'll pass it back over to you to take care of sports and ticketing.
Yeah, another very exciting industry and area. We're involved with a company that is leading the way with this. And so now, you have tickets they're not just the entrance into an event, they are the NFT, they become a collectible, and very often it'll have some utility attached to it. So not only do you have obviously all of the things that go along with NFTs, the authenticity, the immutability, and the other things that are related to it, but now you have access to whatever events that you want to go to. And then you have the added bonus of it increasing in value over time. As we go. So imagine if you had an NFT today of when you attended Woodstock, and you were seated in, in the VIPs or wherever you might have been, or something cool like that, or you had a backstage pass to the first time that the Stones were in Los Angeles or something. Those increase in value when you talk about the community. It's not just the community that happens to be at a football game or at a concert. It's the community that's shaped around that event as long after the event's over, that these NFTs provide access to. And like I said, you attach different utilities to these so that the people don't just have access to these events through the NFTs, they also get some perks or utilities as they continue. So really exciting space. And this is, it hasn't been done. And another thing, when you talk about being able to identify, one of the really exciting things that the company that we're working with is similar to a P2E, where it's a play to earn. When now you buy a ticket to a show that's an NFT and you share it on social media, for example, and let your friends know that you're going to see whoever, and they reference that, then it's tracked. You can earn money by having your friends come in and say, well, you're doing it anyway. If Aaron's going to be playing somewhere, he's going to put it on social media. Hey guys, I'm playing here. Hope you come. And then they go do it. Well, now Aaron is earning money back because he shared it and his friends are using that. So all kinds of great technologies are coming out of this.
So what you're describing, Mike, is the idea that people could actually make money by socially promoting an event or community.
That's right. They are right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, again, this theme of this, it keeps coming up again: community, 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 and people forming them and people deciding what that community is about, and then using these tokens to then gamify the desired behaviors. And the reason why I keep coming back, good, Mike.
I was just going to say, Alan, and you're so right when you talk about community, and that I think philosophically is what all of this is with Web3 and with NFTs, right? I think historically we've looked at competitiveness and conflict in terms of wanting to win and wanting to succeed. With this technology, it's more of a collaborative. It's a community. How do we build and grow together? And that's what's really appealing.
Mm-hmm. It has the potential to invert a lot of what we think about how we engage in fair exchange.
Yeah.
It's I started this and I wanted to give you guys a framework for thinking about a product manager and what can we as individuals and as members of various communities do with Web3. And so to kind of recap, I just want to go through and just iterate for everyone the different ways in which people can invest either their money or their time or their energy or their enthusiasm into these spaces and projects. There's playing the token lottery, right? The unregulated casino that we call crypto. People are making money, people are losing money, no judgment. If that's your thing, some people are great at that, go for it. But I want to point out the other layers to this puzzle, where there's opportunities to be creators and to create communities and to disrupt and to make money. If you're particularly good at math, or if you have children that are good at math, or friends that are good at math, you can invent new and improved mathematical devices. They call these things primitives for a reason. If you're good at math, if you're really good at math, if you love math, you can invent a primitive and the VCs will throw money at you. I can point to example after example after example of this. So if you're good at math, this is your space. Zero in on improving these primitive building blocks that they were using to build these algorithmic intermediaries. You can also assemble these primitives or mathematical building blocks into new and interesting ways. That's what we're doing at the Data Freedom Foundation, attaching the contracts to data as it moves. It's a new assemblage of the same parts, but doing a different thing. You can create new token types. We showed you guys how a contract template, right? When the blockchain has these variables in it, like names and numbers and dates, we have to put it into a contract so everyone knows what that means, right? That smart contract template. Well, that's what a token is. So look across your industries. Look at common, like Mike, you may even have this is the first time for us to talk about this. There's a possibility that very common and widely used contract templates in your industry could be a token.
Absolutely.
And that would be hugely disruptive for your industry if you found one. So you can think about it at that level. And again, you can create communities, or you can look at communities that you're already in, existing communities. And, you know, especially if you're in a community where there's a particularly disliked intermediary that keeps taking more and more and more of a cut between the buyers and sellers of goods and services. Where you see that, that's a huge red flag, right? To go and mobilize a community, to raise its own funding, to build its own platform, to serve the purpose of the community that wants to do something better. The disintermediation that we were talking about earlier. And so, you know, as you look around, right, I want you to be thinking about product managers. I want you to be thinking about what you can do in this space and what Web3 can be for you and for your communities and your industries. Look at all these Web2 platforms that are closed. No one votes on the code, right? The users of the product, right? Look at it, look for inflationary or extortionary intermediaries. They all have a target on their back right now. There's a reason why Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett divested all their shares of Visa and MasterCard and moved it into Web3, because they already see the writing on the wall. So I know all of y'all probably can identify an intermediary in an industry that you think people don't like, right? So I would start there too. So I'm just going to end real quick, just to maybe try and inspire. There's a part of our protocol white paper that I'm just going to read to you guys briefly. It's going to be about 30 seconds, but it's important about, and it kind of echoes back to this picture. So as I'm reading this, take a time to kind of stare into this little picture for a moment. You know, with each new wave of technology, it gives humans superpowers that are defined by the properties and values we imbue our creations, how they work, how reliable they are, how fast, how open, how transparent, how accessible, how accountable, how safe, how they fail, who controls them, and how they're governed. Ultimately, how trustable they are is entirely up to us. And our decisions will affect us and everyone else in the world, including future generations. And we are part of a lucky few who can make a difference. That's the potential of this technology. And so with that, I think we'll end, Aaron, and I know we're a little over, but I guess we'll have questions.
Yeah, we're a little over, but I know we barely scratched the surface too. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I actually was going to start with a question to Mike, which I think is probably going to be a deeper dive. But when we're thinking about this, and this can go across the board with musicians, this can go across the board with anybody who has intellectual property who traditionally it's somewhat been taken from, sometimes maliciously, sometimes it was just part of the protocol of the way the business worked. So moving forward into the future, let's say with musicians or anybody with pro athletes, and they want to own themselves this time, they want to own their IP, they want to monetize it, and they actually start doing that. What do you see being the strategy to go backwards to the stuff that they've already licensed in other ways? You follow me? Like, for instance, if artist has a contract, like when I had music that was with Warner Brothers, there were specific ways that music could be used. So with new music, if you get traction as an artist with the new music on your own, do you see that kind of backtracking? And I would like it to be in an ethical way and a kind way to work with all these other industry or all these other, for lack of a better term, giants in the industries that need to learn to adopt as well. But you see a bridge that could be made from this end backwards to help, in my opinion, help them come forward as well, but also continue to empower the artists to maybe be able to empower themselves through their old IP.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and even if they're not releasing new material, we're working with some of the rock bands who you probably know from the early 80s and mid 80s, who have a lot of things that would be considered like B-roll that are not under the protections or the I should say the inclusions of the label. And so they want to know, like, how can I monetize this? You know, I have the guitar that I played on stage at this concert with, or I have, you know, what was given to me when we did We Are the World and things like that. So now turning those things into NFTs. So, you know, you can work backwards and start to take in all of these things that were used throughout their careers and make those part of what they're building the brand out with. And then whether or not they make some music going forward, obviously include that or not.
Do you see those some sort of fight potentially in the future. For example, like a couple of my friends who were on American Idol, and many of the top people, they had to sue out of their contracts at a certain point because they realized that the contract wasn't really what they thought it was going to be. Now, they should have read it, they should have understood it a little bit better, but a lot of times there's been that, and I'm not saying American Idol's unethical, but there's been unethical practices, or like I said, they're just kind of par for the course in that area, where they took things from artists and the artists could technically get it back if they put the time into it. My objective or hope is that it doesn't have to be nasty lawsuits. It might be a precedent, you know, like Kelly Clarkson was a precedent. So if you talk to people in that industry now, it's part of the process to sue out of your contract. And it's actually in the budget on the end of the TV shows that they're going to sue out of their contract.
Right.
Follow me?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the short answer is yes. I think there's an opportunity, and it doesn't have to be hostile. We were just talking with when we were at the event last night with someone who does this with some really high level musicians, and the label was adamantly against, you know, them doing an NFT until they saw the numbers on the whitelist and the like how much is coming in. Okay, we'll let him sign out. This is the portion that we want to allow him. There's a real opportunity here, so I think everybody can win. Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk to you outside of this because I have a couple friends who I've been talking to about this that I think could be epic for them, honestly, from their experiences. So I have one more question. You guys, I've known Mike a little bit longer, but Mike is also oftentimes people who are at his level and are early adopters. A lot of the wealthier people in the world are early adopters. Mike is also a trendsetter, and I'm curious if you can explain this for us, Mike. Can you share what this is, Mike?
I can't.
Oh,
I see your home screen. Yeah.
Hold on a second. It didn't set up. Man, I just had that.
Was that one of your islands, Mike?
You see it now, Mike?
That was that was when I was, I think, the first official attorney in New Jersey to have one of my suits cut into a short suit. And I said, if they could do it in Bermuda and other islands, why couldn't we do it? It was just as hot in New Jersey in August. And look, it's about creativity. It's about having fun. And it caught on. And I think LeBron was, you know, he was wearing his Tom Ford suit like 2 weeks later. And I shot a message out on social media saying, I did it first, but you did it better. So it got a lot of attention. And I'm gonna bring that look down here to Miami.
That's beautiful.
All right, thanks for being a good sport with me, Mike. All right, who else has a question? Or even Mike, if there's something else you wanted to share that you haven't shared, it seems like people are still here. They want to listen for a couple more minutes. Any other thoughts?
No, Alan, did you have anything? I have one other thing that.
No, I'm good. Yeah, you add whatever you think is would be beneficial.
Yeah, like it really is what you said, Alan, early on, just trying to start thinking about it, like how this will or can benefit you in whatever industry you're in, because it's happening. And it's, you know, it's still so early that it might not be apparent, but there is a use case for everyone, regardless of what you're doing. And so just try to take a little time to start learning about it, small doses. You know, everything that Alan's sharing is absolutely incredible, and it'll come to you. I mean, you'll start to understand it, and then you'll really you'll have that aha moment, like, I get it now. This is why it's so revolutionary. So I remember talking to you, Aaron, about it back in Mobile, I believe. And, you know, the metaverse and everything else, it was kind of just like this, what is this? But now everybody's, you know, talking about it, and it's happening. So as much as your kids and your grandkids are on their computers and on their phones, that's where, you know, things are happening. They're great sources. I mean, the kids can be great mentors. They know so much more about a lot of this than we do. So, you know, I surround myself with people who are 20 and 30 years younger than me. Just to make sure that we stay up to speed. So great source of information by talking to the younger generations.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who watch this recording and who are still here, the recordings of these are at a link that I posted in the chat. If you want to follow back and go back and look through, I know Fritz said, hey, Aaron, I need to go through this again. So how do I watch it again? We're working on getting them all up on the website. And again, we'll be next Thursday at 10 a.m. Central on Clubhouse, continuing this discussion, doing more Q&A. So if things come up between now and then, write them down, bring them to the party, and we'll continue to dive. Alan, I'll pass it back to you to close this out.
Yeah, just one last thing. So the next topic in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about distributed autonomous organizations. When we keep talking about these communities and how they work, well, we're going to dig into how that actually happens. And there'll be a whole session on DAOs. And then following that, we'll have a whole nother session. Dr. Mark, who's also a coin carrier, will be talking about the metaverse. So he's coming up after the next session. And hopefully by that point, we'll have enough foundation. I think you guys will start to see how these things start to fit together. And you can begin to, do something with it. Hey, Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask, and we can dive into it in the weeks to come, or if you need to tell me to go back and look at a past episode, I'll be more than happy to. But the one thing I've had a difficulty with NFTs is the actual, I've got, money in my crypto wallet and things like that there, but, everything you have to buy through Ethereum. And Ethereum, yes, is a good coin. But do you see a point in time where, even U.S. currency, whether it's, gold, the gold standard or whatnot, which is still, I think antiquated in its hindsight, but where people can still pay with a credit card, because it seems to be a 5-step process. If you want to buy an NFT, it's like, all right, well, I want to buy an NFT. It's going to cost 1.8 Ethereum, and I have to now go buy the Ethereum, pay a surcharge for that, also pay the credit card fee because I put it on the credit card, and then use Ethereum to go buy this and pay another surcharge. There's like 5 different or 3 or 4 different surcharges that go through it. Do you see that changing over time, or it getting more streamlined?
I can tell you, Alan, if I could just jump in for a second. One of the companies that I invested in about a year ago was focused on solving this problem. So yes, it's coming. It's called NFT Pay, and there are other companies like it that are bridging that gap so that you don't have to have a wallet. You don't have to, you can do it through Ethereum or whatever other cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's awesome, because I know that's been one of the things that, I've seen people
The
that
barrier to entry for sure.
Barrier
Yeah.
to entry. Yep.
So it is always, I know there are people are going to watch this or go back and listen to it. And I want them to know that there's a solution out there.
Yeah.
Or it's coming.
Yeah. And for just off topic, Aaron, just to go back to your question, if there was anything I wanted to add to anyone who is getting into NFTs, buy your names, domains like the old aaronellis.com kind of thing. Now names are NFTs, the domains are NFTs. So you go buy your names before someone else does.
Where do you do
That's
that?
smart.
Where do you do that?
Ethereum
there
name
are a couple-
service. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan. You could.
No, you said I don't know the exact places to go. So you got like.
Yeah, ENS. So Ethereum name service is one of them, and there are a couple of others, but that's a big one. So it would be like aaronellis.eth, or you could buy them on a couple of the different chains. But the difference with these is that you own them as an NFT, and it's your name, obviously.
Got it. Cool.
And Matt, you'd ask about being able to exchange, like streamlining the exchange of traditional currency into these digital currencies. What Joel and I would probably say to that answer is that with Joel's stablecoin is that we want to open up the capacity of people to make money in this space, so that they're transacting and they're not even transacting in dollars per se. This idea that if data propagates endlessly at zero cost without our knowledge, right, then how will we ever be paid for the works of our minds? We won't. And so, he who can solve, or they who can solve this data propagation problem, which is what we're working on with the Data Freedom Foundation, right? That allows us now to do works of our mind in the digital space and to get paid for it.
Yeah.
And that's where Joel's, the stablecoins come in. And because that's also another part of the puzzle to make this actually work. So to answer your question about being able to move money in, I would say in the future people will make money in this space. They won't even make their money in dollars. And then the transacting between these two mediums won't even be what people are worried about, because they're more worried about making a living now off of the works of their mind, which is something we call an economy of ideas. And that's the title of our protocol's white paper. It's creating the economy of ideas. Because
Yeah.
that's what we're doing, is we're ending this propagation so we can finally monetize the works of our mind. So, you know, there's both the short term that Mike was talking about streamlined ways of moving money in. But the people like us, we're focused on, Joel, we're focused on this idea of creating a real digital economy.
Yep.
Where the works of our mind are monetizable, where they're not today. They're not today at all.
And that's one of the things that I would definitely, be more apt at doing, because, I've been subject to, I've gotten several cease and desist letters for, leaving a company, and they're like, oh, well, you took our ideas. I'm like, no. I was like, here's all the emails and stuff where I brought the idea to you before you even hired me. You hired me because of the idea. Now you're trying to say, and I'm like, it doesn't work that way. And it was even funny after last week's Clubhouse call, is I had a conversation with my ownership team at ProSense, and I was like, man, it'd be awesome if we could create our own NFT or token of some sorts, because I almost look at it as like a crowd fund, or that you've done in the past, and that way people can invest at a monetary level, and that way I'm not giving up shares, but I'm allowing people that want to be in the green space or the lab space, medical or energy space, they have the opportunity to get in and say, hey, we're investing in making a difference within the environment in these different opportunities. So
yeah. All you're doing is you're saying we're going to build a community. The community is going to have a mission, and the community is going to raise funds, and we're going to use a state engine, like we were saying earlier, for our community, and we're going to build tools and gamify behaviors in our community that produce the desired outcomes that the community wants. That's this repeating theme over and over and over again across all these different examples, and it applies to all the ones you're mentioning as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys taking your time and answering those questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
Thank you, Joel.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.